Without more ado, I'd like to welcome my friend Auriol Britton, who's been doing this many years, almost as long as I've been curating concerts here. And it's pay attention to the first bit as well as to the poems, because Auriol researches the life. You might think you know about William Wordsworth, but I'm sure you'll find out things you didn't know.
Good afternoon. William Wordsworth was born on the 7th of April 1770 at Cockermouth, Cumberland. Cumbria was then divided into two counties, Cumberland and Westmoreland. The second of 5 children, William and his sister Dorothy, born the following year, were baptized together. His father was a moderately prosperous estate manager, legal representative to the first Earl of Lonsdale, and they lived in a large mansion in the small town. He encouraged William in reading, committing large portions of verse to memory, including the works of Milton and Spenser, which William would pore over in his father's library. Wordsworth was taught to read, in fact, by his mother. The first school he attended was of low quality. Then he went to a school in Penrith for the children of upper-class families, where they insisted on the young people learning about local festivals around Shrove Tuesday, Easter, and May Day. They were taught both the Bible and the Spectator, then a compilation of essays, and little else. Wordsworth's mother died when he was aged just 8. The boys were sent to Hawkshead Grammar School, then in Lancashire. Dorothy was sent to stay with relatives in Yorkshire. They were not to meet him and Dorothy for 9 years. The boys received an excellent education in the classics, literature, and maths. However, the school really excelled in pleasures of the outdoors. I grew up fostered alike by beauty and fear, he said. When he was aged just 13, Wordsworth's father died. His first surviving verse, aged 15, is lines written as a school exercise. He made his debut as a writer in 1787, when he published a sonnet in a European magazine. That same year, William went up to St. John's College, Cambridge. He elected to idle his way through university, persuaded that it was not his time or place. In the summer of 1790, he went on a walking tour of the Alps, visiting France, Switzerland, and Italy. He graduated in 1791 with an undistinguished pass. In November 1791, Wordsworth visited revolutionary France. He became enchanted with the Republican movement. He had a passionate love affair with Annette Vallon, and in December 1792, their daughter Caroline was born. He returned to Great Britain in early 1793, seeking a livelihood, and they were kept apart by the war between Britain and France. The Reign of Terror left Wordsworth disillusioned with the revolution. Apparently, there is an unpublished seditious letter to the Bishop of Llandaff. The next few years were perhaps the darkest of Wordsworth's life. Unprepared for any profession, rootless, virtually penniless, he was in London, keeping company with radicals such as William Godwin, and he learned to feel sympathy with mothers, children, and beggars. In 1793, Wordsworth published his first collection of poems, including An Evening Walk and Descriptive Sketches. In 1794, William was reunited with his sister Dorothy at Windy Brow, Keswick, Cumberland. They were never to be parted again. He started nursing Raisley Calvert, who died in January 1795, leaving him £900. This enabled him to pursue a career as a poet. They settled at Racedown, Dorset, before moving to Alfoxden House, Somerset. Around 1797, the Great Decade began. In collaboration with Samuel Taylor Coleridge and with insights from Dorothy, Lyrical Ballads was published anonymously. These breached the decorum of earlier classical verse and included lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey, a short excerpt of which we will hear shortly. This was an important work in the English Romantic movement. The second edition of Lyrical Ballads came out in 1800, and it only had Wordsworth's name on it. After all, he had done most of the poems therein. It also had a preface. There was a further augmented edition in 1802, in which Wordsworth explained his new type of poetry, one based on ordinary language used by real men. The poems often feature nature, rural life. Some are tributes to his sister. The fourth and final edition came out in 1805. In the autumn of 1798, William, Dorothy, and Coleridge went to Germany. They lived in Goslar. Wordsworth was homesick. It was a hard winter, characterized by stress and loneliness. He wrote a lot of poetry that winter, including starting work on the two-part prelude. In December 1799, they moved to Dove Cottage, Grasmere. William and Dorothy, that is. Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Robert Southey became known as the Lake Poets. The theme of his poetry at this time included grief, separation, death, and endurance. In August 1802, the short-lived Peace of Amiens enabled William and Dorothy to visit Calais and daughter Caroline, to visit Annette and daughter Caroline in Calais. Caroline was by that time 9 years old. William made his peace with Annette and supported his French family financially thereafter. He was paid £4,000 by the Earl of Lonsdale due to his father, enabling him to marry Mary Hutchinson, which he duly did on the 4th of October. They had been friends since childhood. They would go on to have 5 children, 3 of whom died before Wordsworth did. In 1803 came the first of a number of tours of Scotland, and that always sounds like a good idea. In 1805, Wordsworth's brother John drowned. The shock and distress affected his poetry deeply. Although he'd completed 13 volumes of The Prelude, I tell you, a 13-volume autobiography, the devastating impact of John's death might be why he refused to publish something so personal. In 1807, Poems in 2 volumes was published. Wordsworth was staggered by the criticism of it. As well as I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, the principal poem therein is the ode Intimations of Immortality. The middle part of Wordsworth's career featured much criticism. In 1808, they moved to Allen Bank, a large house in Grasmere. 1809 saw the publication of the Convention of Sintra. The original Convention of Sintra was a sort of agreement between Great Britain and France, and it was about soldiers coming home from Portugal, I think. Anyway, he did a poem called The Convention of Sintra. In 1810, Wordsworth and Coleridge became estranged over the latter's opium addiction. The first version of Guide to the Lakes was published as an anonymous preface to James Wilkinson's Select Views in Cumberland, Westmoreland and Lancashire. 1813 saw Wordsworth appointed distributor of stamps for Westmoreland, a post in the Revenue Service, at £400 per year. The family moved to Rydal Mount, where he would live for the rest of his life. In 1814, The Excursion was published. Now, this was originally intended to be part of something called The Recluse, but only 1/3 of The Recluse was ever published, namely The Excursion. It consists of 9 philosophical monologues spoken by pastoral characters. It is long. The first part contains a version of The Ruined Cottage in blank verse, describing the sad decline of a woman whose husband went into the army and never returned. A later version has a reconciled conclusion. Part of The Ruined Cottage we will hear in a minute. 1815 saw the publication of The White Doe of Rylestone, something he'd written earlier in response to criticism. The first collected edition of poems came out, with preface. In 1816, Wordsworth published Letter to a Friend of Robert Burns. He admired the Scottish bard, don't we all? In 1817, Wordsworth was moving in London circles widely and met Keats. In 1818, Wordsworth campaigned energetically for the Tories in Westmoreland at the general election, much to the dismay of his family and admirers. The younger Wordsworth was a romantic revolutionary. The older one was more of an Anglican Tory humanist. He published in 1819 The Waggoner, an extended ballad about a North Country itinerant, and Peter Bell. Both were written earlier in his life. Wordsworth published sequences of sonnets. One such was The River Duddon in 1820. This helped to re-establish his reputation. It charts the progress of a river through the Lake District. There was a further collected works. He toured Europe, revisiting sites from the 1790 tour, and published Memorials of a Tour on the Continent. Ecclesiastical Sketches came out in 1822. Also that year, his first separate publication of a description of the scenery of the lakes, later published as Guide to the Lakes. That happened as well that year. In 1829, Wordsworth was profoundly dismayed by Roman Catholic emancipation, but I can say, for the benefit of the Roman Catholics among us today, many of us do not share his view. In 1832, agitated by the Reform Bill, Wordsworth entered a period of greatly exaggerated alarm at the state of the country. Who would have thought? In 1834, Coleridge died, though they had become reunited before that. 1835 saw the publication of Yarrow Revisited, and I will talk about that in a minute. In 1837, he toured France and Italy. 1838, there came sonnets collected in one volume. In 1838, Wordsworth received an honorary doctorate in civil law from the University of Durham. The following year, there was an honorary degree from, of all places, Oxford. 1842 saw the publication of poems, chiefly of early and late years, including The Borderers and Salisbury Plain. He wrote Salisbury Plain when he was young, and The Borderers started life as a play. He resigned his stamp distributorship. In 1843, Wordsworth became Poet Laureate. He refused initially, saying that he was too old, but the Prime Minister said, "Nothing will be required of you." He therefore became the only Poet Laureate to publish no official verse. In 1845, there was another volume of collected poems. Wordsworth completely gave up writing new material following the devastating death of his daughter in 1847, by which he was completely stricken. Wordsworth died of aggravated pleurisy on St. George's Day, the 23rd of April, 1850. I've lost the microphone. It's gone. Wordsworth died of aggravated pleurisy on St. George's Day, 1850, the 23rd of April. He is buried at St. Oswald's Church, Grasmere. Wordsworth's autobiographical poem, A Circular Journey Through Youth, the long journey home, it has been called, the prelude or growth of a poet's mind, for which Wordsworth is especially well known, seemed to go through various manuscript versions and was published posthumously in 1850. Although it failed to impress at the time, it became highly regarded later. A lot of time in Wordsworth's later life was spent tinkering, as his family called it, with earlier work. Earlier versions are often better, but there are still flashes of brilliance in his 70s. This incessant revision of poems, different versions in different books, as well as the sheer volume of material which he produced, makes Wordsworth particularly hard to study. As a fairly unsuccessful writer myself, with only very, very moderate success indeed, I would say that once it is going into print, that is it. Your part in it, your part in doing anything to it has finished, apart from publicising it. Ken Russell's 1978 film, William and Dorothy, portrays the relationship between brother and sister. Wordsworth and Coleridge's friendship is examined by Julian Temple's 2000 film entitled Pandemonium. Wordsworth has appeared as a character in fiction. Right, let's crack on with the poems, because I am aware that some people are on a timetable, a bus timetable. So we're going to hear a spread of poems across Wordsworth's life today, just to give you a sort of flavour. But the enormous quantity of stuff that he did and his tendency to revise things just makes him nigh on impossible and I don't think I've done justice to him. I'm going to begin with a short excerpt from the beginning of Lines Written a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey. This appeared in Lyrical Ballads, which also contained Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Much of the rest of it was by Wordsworth, and this poem, Lines Written as a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey, was a central feature. We're just going to hear a part at the beginning, and it says, "On revisiting the banks of the Wye during a tour, July the 13th, 1798. 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a sweet inland murmur. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs, which on a wild, secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. The day is come again when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season with their unripe fruits among the woods and copses lose themselves, nor with their green and simple hue disturb the wild green landscape. This is a very short poem. Intimations of immortality sort of goes back to childhood and things as far as I can figure out. This does a sort of similar thing. It is called by its first line, which is, "My heart leaps up when I behold." My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began. So is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. I think, keeping going, that ability to have a childhood kind of delight at things and not become jaded on things, whilst at the same time having the wisdom of age seems an excellent combination. This one is entitled The Butterfly. Now, I read 2 called The Butterfly, and this was the second one. There's also one nearby called The Redbreast and Butterfly. But this is the second poem that he did called The Butterfly. Roger reads a lot of the poems out to me, but I had a very old Wordsworth book in Braille, which is very hard to read. It's big, it's very old, and it helpfully chooses the short ones. But what he will do is write a great long poem about something, and then the next day he will go another poem basically called More of the Same, as if he hadn't already said everything there was to say about it. Anyway, this is The Butterfly. I've watched you now a full half hour, self-poised upon that yellow flower. And, little butterfly, indeed, I know not if you sleep or feed. How motionless! Not frozen seas, more motionless. And then what joy awaits you when the breeze hath found you out among the trees and calls you forth again. This plot of orchard ground is ours. My trees they are, my sister's flowers. Stop here whenever you are weary and rest as in a sanctuary. Come often to us, fear no wrong, sit near to us on the bough. We'll talk of sunshine and of song, and summer days when we were young, sweet childish days that were as long as 20 days are now. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth to me the show had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Do learn some poetry by heart. I'm a somewhat slower poetry learner than I used to be. I can't do it all by heart now, but still have a few pieces up your sleeve that you can draw upon. This poem is entitled Lines Written at a Small Distance from Our House and Sent to my little boy, and sent by my little boy to the person to whom they are addressed. Now, we're really getting into the realms of Wordsworth and his incessant revisions now. So this is also called To My Sister, and it is about learning from nature, not just from books. So here we have lines written a short distance from my house. It is the first mild day of March, each minute sweeter than before. The redbreast sings in a tall larch that stands beside our door. There is a blessing in the air, which seems a sense of joy to yield to the bare trees and mountains bare, and grass in the green field. My sister, 'tis a wish of mine, that now our morning meal is done, make haste, your morning task resign, come forth and feel the sun. Edward will come with you, and pray, put on with speed your woodland dress, and bring no book, for this one day we'll give to idleness. No joyless forms shall regulate our living calendar. We from today, my friend, will date the opening of the year. Love, now an universal birth, from heart to heart is stealing. From earth to man, from man to earth, it is the hour of feeling. One moment now may give us more than 50 years of reason. Our minds shall drink at every pore the spirit of the season. Some silent laws our hearts may make, which they shall long obey. We for the year to come may take our temper from today. And from the blessed power that rolls about, below, above, we'll frame the measure of our souls. They shall be tuned to love. Then come, my sister, come, I pray, with speed put on your woodland dress, and bring no book, for this one day we'll give to idleness. This, I think, has only one title, though some people may find a few others. It's entitled Lines Written in Early Spring. I heard 1,000 blended notes while in a grove I sate reclined, in that sweet mood when pleasant thoughts bring sad thoughts to the mind. To her fair works did nature link the human soul that through me ran, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man. Through primrose tufts in that green bower, the periwinkle trails its wreaths, and 'tis my faith that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. The birds around me hopped and played, their thoughts I cannot measure, but the least motion which they made, it seemed a thrill of pleasure. The budding twigs spread out their fan to catch the breezy air, and I must think, do all I can, that there be pleasure there. If this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? What man has made of man indeed, is that not still the case today? This is another sonnet with which I'm sure all our highly scholarly audience here will be familiar with. This is Lines Composed upon Westminster Bridge, September the 3rd, 1802. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare. Ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendour valley, rock, or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. I think that Wordsworth's description there of the London landscape in the early 19th century is every bit as good as some of his nature poems, but perhaps that's something we can debate afterwards. Now, here we go again then with, this is a short poem called She Dwelt Among the Untrodden Ways. But of course, being Wordsworth, it's also called Song. I prefer the title Song, actually. I don't know about you, but here it is. She dwelt among the untrodden ways, beside the springs of Dove, a maid whom there were none to praise, and very few to love. A violet by a mossy stone, half hidden from the eye, fair as a star when only one is shining in the sky. She lived unknown, and few could know when Lucy ceased to be. But she is in her grave, and oh, the difference to me. I hope you can all hear this okay. Can you all hear this? Yes? Okay, good. And hopefully it's coming out it will be on the internet in 7 days' time, hopefully within the next few days. So hopefully it's coming out. They can hear it on there as well when they read it. Now, Wordsworth was apparently against the railways, But in this sonnet, entitled At Furness Abbey, he has sympathy with the ordinary folk working on the railways, or the actually extraordinary folk working on them. He has sympathy. He doesn't blame them for decisions made above their heads. This is At Furness Abbey. Well have you railway labourers to this ground withdrawn for noontide rest. They sit, they walk among the ruins, but no idle talk is heard. To grave demeanour all are bound. And from one voice a hymn of tuneful sound hallows once more the long deserted choir, and thrills the old sepulchral earth around. Others look up, and with fixed eyes admire that wide-spanned arch, wondering how it was raised, to keep so high in air its strength and grace. All seem to feel the spirit of the place, and by the general reverence, God is praised. Profane despoilers, stand ye not reproved, while thus these simple-hearted men are moved. I have composed a few not very good sonnets in my time, none of them in print. Actually, no, one was published in a newspaper once. I'll tell you about it afterwards. It was published, it was called Sonnet 103, and it was published in a newspaper in Dumfries and Galloway. Anyway, what I've never understood is how poets, whether they're writing a Shakespearean sonnet, 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet, or whether they are writing a Petrarchan one, an octet and a sestet, how they sometimes manage to cross over from one part of the poem to another without in the same sentence. It's seamless. And yet the second 6 lines of this poem have a different kind of ambience to the first 8. But yes, how they manage to seamlessly go from one section of a sonnet to another. I have never managed that. I've only ever managed to write ones within their own kind of compartmented in their traditional kind of way. This is entitled The Solitary Reaper, and I performed this at a drama competition earlier this year, and the reason the adjudicator chose this of all the poems I submitted was that it has a completely different ending. In one book, it has a completely different ending, probably better than this ending, as it happens. But this really, some of his poems really highlights what a nuisance this tinkering can actually be. This is called The Solitary Reaper. Behold her, single in the field, yon solitary Highland lass, reaping and singing by herself. Stop here, or gently pass. Alone she cuts and binds the grain, and sings a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. No nightingale did ever chaunt so sweetly to reposing bands of travellers in some shady haunt among Arabian sands. No sweeter voice was ever heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest Hebrides. Will no one tell me what she sings? Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow for old, unhappy, far-off things and battles long ago. Or is it some more humble lay, familiar matter of today? some natural sorrow, loss, or pain that has been, and maybe again. Whate'er the theme, the maiden sang as if her song could have no ending. I saw her singing at her work and o'er the sickle bending. I listened till I had my fill, and as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore. Long after it was heard no more. This is an excerpt from the opening of The Ruined Cottage. Now, The Ruined Cottage was part of the Excursion, this long thing he published with the pastoral characters and the philosophical monologues. I don't know much about the Excursion, but it was originally going to be part of something called The Recluse, which was going to tackle basically everything, philosophy, religion, goodness knows what, when it was planned. Anyway, the Excursion was the only bit of it that came out. And The Ruined Cottage, as I said in my introduction, is a poem in blank verse about it's this sort of, this poor lady in this cottage, and it's all falling into rack and ruin because her husband has gone and is not coming back. And she's obviously got depression. And whether it was, and Wordsworth knew of that, and he knew what she was going through. 'Twas summer, and the sun was mounted high. Along the south, the uplands feebly glared through a pale steam, and all the northern downs in clearer air ascending showed far off their surfaces with shadows dappled o'er of deep embattled clouds. Far as the sight could reach, those many shadows lay in spots, determined and unmoved, with steady beams of clear and pleasant sunshine interposed. Pleasant to him who on the soft cool moss extends his careless limbs beside the root of some huge oak, whose aged branches make a twilight of their own, a dewy shade where the wren warbles while the dreaming man, half conscious of the soothing melody, with sidelong eye looks out upon the scene by those impending branches made more soft and distant. Other lot was mine. Across a bare wide common I had toiled with languid feet which by the slippery ground were baffled still. And when I stretched myself on the brown earth, my limbs from very heat could feel no rest, nor my weak arm disperse the insect host which gathered round my face and joined their murmurs to the tedious noise of seeds of bursting gorse that crackled round. I will be honest with you, that's not my favourite ever piece of Wordsworth. Why on earth he didn't have the strength to just lift up his arm and brush the insects away from his face? I mean, come on. We have two more poems to go, ladies and gentlemen. I mentioned earlier Yarrow Revisited. Yarrow is a perennial plant. It has a sweet, fairly strong scent, stronger than a chrysanthemum, it says on the internet. It's quite powerful, the scent, and could be mildly irritating to some. The stems, it can have several stems, they grow up to 1 meter high. The white pinkish flowers it has, and there are sort of spirally leaves. and it occurs in temperate climates of Europe, the United Kingdom, North America, and Asia. Now, Wordsworth had a fair bit to say about yarrow. Didn't he, about many things, but he certainly had a lot to say about yarrow. There are 3 poems that I can identify, and I'm no Wordsworth expert. They are Yarrow Unvisited, Yarrow Visited, which we're about to hear, and the famous one, Yarrow Revisited. This is from September 1814. Please settle in for 2.5 Braille pages of Wordsworth and Yarrow Visited. And is this Yarrow, this the stream of which my fancy cherished, so faithfully a waking dream, an image which hath perished? Oh, that some minstrel's harp were near to utter notes of gladness, and chase this silence from the air that fills my heart with sadness. Yet why a silvery current flows with uncontrolled meanderings, nor have these eyes by greener hills been soothed in all my wanderings. And through her depths St. Mary's Lake is visibly delighted, for not a feature of those hills is in the mirror slighted. A blue sky bends o'er Yarrow Vale, save where the pearly whiteness is round the rising sun diffused, a tender, hazy brightness. Mild dawn of promise that excludes all profitless dejection, though not unwilling here to admit a pensive recollection. Where was it that the famous flower of Yarrow Vale lay bleeding? His bed, perchance, was yon smooth mound whereon the herd is feeding. And happy from this crystal pool, now peaceful as the morning, the water wraith ascended thrice and gave his doleful warning. Delicious is the lay that sings the haunts of happy lovers, the path that leads them to the grove, the leafy grove that covers. And pity sanctifies the verse that paints by strength of sorrow the unconquerable strength of love. Bear witness, rueful Yarrow. But thou that didst appear so fair to fond imagination, dost rival in the light of day a delicate creation. Meek loveliness is round thee spread, a sadness still and holy, a grace of forest charms decayed, a pastoral melancholy. That region left, the vale unfolds rich groves of lofty stature, with Yarrow winding through the pomp of cultivated nature. And rising from those lofty groves, behold a ruin hoary, the shattered front of Newark's towers, renowned in border glory. Fair scenes for childhood's opening bloom, for sportive youth to play in, for manhood to enjoy his strength, and age to wear away in. Yon cottage seems a bower of bliss. It promises protection to studious ease and generous cares, and every chaste affection. How sweet on this autumnal day the wildwood's fruits to gather, and on my true love's forehead plant a crest of blooming heather. And what if I enwreathed my own? 'Twere no offence to reason. The sober hills thus deck their brows to meet the wintry season. I see, but not by sight alone, loved Yarrow, I have won thee. A ray of fancy still survives, her sunshine plays upon thee. Thy ever youthful waters keep a course of lively pleasure, and gladness and gladsome notes my lips can breathe, accordant to the measure. The vapours linger round the height, they melt and soon must vanish. 1 hour is theirs, nor more is mine. Sad thought, which I would banish. But that I know where'er I go, thy genuine image, Yarrow, will dwell with me to heighten joy and cheer my mind in sorrow. Thank you very much for turning out to come to this today. You're such a great audience turning out every year, and when new people come along, it's such a lot of work putting these poetry recitals together, and it's all done in about 45 minutes. So, please do give generously your cash donations to the tub at the back. If you are listening and watching this online at a future date, please do also send something into the church, St. Stephen's Church in Bristol city centre, marked for the lunchtime concerts. Don't leave it all to the people who come here and make up the live audience. Please do your best to contribute if you're listening remotely. So I'm going to close then with the conclusion of the River Duddon. Now, the River Duddon was this sonnet sequence which Wordsworth brought out in 1820. And it began, really, the restoration of his reputation. This is the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, of the River Duddon. I thought of thee, my partner and my guide, as being passed away. Vain sympathies. For backward, Duddon, as I cast my eyes, I see what was and is and will abide. Still glides the stream and shall forever glide. The form remains, the function never dies. While we, the brave, the mighty and the wise, we men, who in our morn of youth defied the elements, must vanish. Be it so. Enough if something from our hands have power to live and act and serve the future hour, and if, as toward the silent tomb we go, through love, through hope, and faith's transcendent dower, we feel that we are greater than we know. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Next year, it's to America we go, and Robert Frost. Thank you.